Welcome to Miami and ABC News Live's special coverage of the first presidential primary debate. It was a big night here in Miami. We have full highlights and analysis ahead, some of the key moments we were tracking, plus reaction from key players, and what's going to happen very shortly in the spin room behind us. The campaign's coming on. I'm joined by our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks. Democratic strategist Amanda Renteria is here as well. She was in the room, so we'll have to get your take very shortly, Amanda. But first, we want to take a look at this field, take a look at some footage from the debate. 10 candidates, 2 hours of questions, and there was one big technical snafu that caught all of us off guard. Here's a little bit of that moment as this went down in the debate hall. It's quite something. Amanda, you were there when the thing went off the rails. What happened?
So everyone didn't quite know what it was.
It
sounded like it was somebody's phone, and then we started hearing about a binder and picking up stuff.
It was just hot mics.
Right, and that's when that's when Chuck turns around and says, "All right, we've got a problem here," and everyone sort of laughed. And
sort of unusual to get things about halfway through the debate, Mary Alice, but also we had a whole bunch of other surprises tonight, including a whole number of candidates speaking Spanish for the first time in a presidential debate. I think by my count 4.
Right. I was really struck by the fact that Mayor Castro, former HUD secretary, really seemed to come to play. I saw him with more command tonight than I have probably in any other national appearance that I have seen him do. You know, he really tried to define himself tonight. He knew that the news cycle was working in his favor, and he wanted to capitalize on that. And I think he probably did. We saw that Google Trend searches had him sort of through the roof. People were curious about him, checking him out. He was literally listing parts of the federal code, trying to show that he has a really deep knowledge of the border issues.
And it does seem, Amanda, that this debate has sort of kicked this campaign into a different gear. It sort of has a feel now that we've sort of shifted. The contrasts are a lot clearer among these candidates than they were coming into this debate.
And you could see that happen tonight, right? People were making themselves clear on who they were and what they were doing and what issues they were comfortable in, right? And even willing to take on some others on the issues they were most comfortable with. And that's what you saw with Secretary Castro tonight.
What struck you most about the field in general? You have worked with a lot of these campaigns over the years. You've certainly tracked the course of this early campaign so far. What stood out most to you tonight?
How deep people went into policy. The nuances of people fighting or saying this is where I am on this side and this is where I am on that side, and really having that kind of policy conversation. And no one really letting the other get away with just very top line ideas, whether that was the moderators or really folks on the stage.
Yeah, but I would say there was really little finger pointing. It was much more about them defining their party than defining each other. I was expecting them to go after each other a little bit more, maybe even go after Joe Biden, the presumed front runner at this point, but there was very little of that. I think mostly everyone wanted to play nice. They wanted to talk about areas of agreement across the Democratic Party.
A couple of surprises.
But they were disagreeing on the policy aspects of it.
Sure.
So that part was kind of interesting. But I agree with you. And this is first debate. It's hard to just go after people when people don't know you yet. And for most of these candidates, they weren't known quite yet. And
a winner tonight, before we move on, somebody who stood out to you, Secretary Castro.
Yeah, I agree. I think Castro had a big night. I think Bill de Blasio also landed a lot of lines. You know, he was really personal, talking about his own family, but also pretty macro, talking about running the largest country or the largest city in the country. So I think he had a pretty good night for himself as well.
And we know Elizabeth Warren, senator who has the only candidate on the stage who had double digits headed into tonight, got the most time speaking and answering questions. There was some criticism about that. We'll come back at that. But let's check in now with what's happening on the spin room floor behind me. We see the candidate signs are out. It is crowded out there, and that's where Avery Harper is checking things out. Avery, what's going on out there right now?
Well, it's all beginning. You can see around me that there's so many people because all of those candidates, their staffs, they're all heading over here to the spin room. I'm going to step out of the way so I can kind of show you exactly what's happening here. You see all these journalists from news organizations from all over the country and the world. All of these campaigns are carrying these posters here. They have their cards out. What was really interesting to me is I talked to some campaigns who they're going to have a lot of folks that are out here. They're going to call those people the spinners. They're trying to frame their candidates as the ones who have won this debate, but they only get one card. So all those spinners have to kind of stay together and to talk to all of these journalists who are here. This is a really big room, so there's lots of people to talk to. A lot of these journalists will want to get some answers from those campaigns and those candidates once they hit the floor of the spin room. We have lots of reporters who are all over the floor here in the spin room, so we'll be here bringing you updates as soon as we have them. Back to you, Devin.
those candidates and their teams still making their way from a different venue. It was across the street. You had to travel over here to this complex here in Miami where the debate is being held tonight. Let's get into immigration a little bit. That sort of was front and center tonight. And this exchange between Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke really set off some fireworks. Take a look.
Let's be very clear. The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Beto. I think it's a mistake. And I think that if you truly want to change the system, then we got to repeal that section. If not, then it might as well be the same policy.
Let me respond to this very briefly. Actually, as a member of Congress, I helped to introduce legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we do that, I don't think it's asking too much for people to follow our laws when they come to this country.
I'm talking about millions of folks. A lot of folks that are coming are not seeking asylum. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants, right? And you said recently that the reason you didn't want to repeal Section 1325 was because you were concerned about human trafficking and drug trafficking. But let me tell you what, Section 18, Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Title 21, and Title 22 already cover human trafficking and drug trafficking. I think that you should do your homework on this issue. If you did your homework on this issue, you would know that we should repeal this section.
This is an issue that we should and could be talking about for a long time, and we will.
In the immigration debate, it's pretty well.
So not just a breakout moment tonight for Julian Castro, but a breakout issue. This is something that sort of came out of left field, Amanda, this idea of criminal versus civil penalties for crossing the border illegally. All of a sudden, our campaign reporters have told us this has become a hot topic, a litmus test, and Castro was really driving that home tonight. Break it down for us. What is he talking about?
So and this is really what he was doing tonight, right? He was educating everyone about immigration, and he knew he was the first one that rolled out that immigration policy, so he could go toe-to-toe with anyone on it. And people talk a lot about this, the children border separation issue, but the reality is there is actually laws that make it difficult in some ways to move your kids from the adults, and that's really what he was getting at today, which is there is a way to address that single issue alone right now, today, and that was his point.
And he was basically saying that right now it is a crime. It is treated as a crime when you come across subject to criminal law. That is why you need to take the kids from the parents, because they need to be put in a detention center. And he's saying, let's change that to making it a civil offense, which is much different and not treated with the same level of security concerns.
And part of his argument is because people, he would say, are not being able to declare asylum at regular ports of entry under this administration at the same levels. And so they are resorting to crossing between ports of entry at a new level. And so he's saying that's part of the reason that this should be decriminalized. And it is interesting to watch how many of the Democrats, like you said, are agreeing with him. But I have to imagine that Republicans are liking that, because it's starting to sound more and more like Democrats do support some concept of open borders, which has been a constant critique for Republicans back against this field.
Let's bring in an immigration expert into this conversation for his take on this. Leon Fresco joins us from Washington, D.C., former Deputy Assistant Attorney General on immigration litigation during the Obama administration. Leon, thanks for joining us and burning the midnight oil here on a Wednesday night. What's your take on this debate between Beto and Castro on the criminalization issue, and also how immigration factored sort of broadly tonight? Were you surprised to see it play such a significant role?
Well, I think immigration is going to be the central issue of the campaign, regardless of whether the Democrats want it to be or not, because President Trump is going to keep inserting it into the debate and is making it his top issue. And so Democrats will have to come up with a response for how they will address immigration in the United States. And so the question is, are you trying to give a rhetorical device like Mayor Castro and Secretary Castro was trying to give, or are you trying to give a more practical solution? Because there isn't one Republican in the world who's going to vote to end 8 U.S.C. 1325, because at the end of the day, if a terrorist is trying to cross the border, you got to be able to prosecute him immediately for something. And so you don't want to have to prove that he's a terrorist already in order to just hold him there until you can prove he's a terrorist. So it's never going to happen. And so the question is, what do you do rhetorically to respond to that so that the party doesn't get so far out to the left that it can't restore itself when they're running in the general against President Trump?
Yeah, that's a fascinating point. Actually, Amanda, the point that Amy Klobuchar was making, one of the centrists on that stage tonight, she was sort of cautious to embrace the Castro proposal, saying, we've actually got to take a careful line against terrorists, drug cartels, traffickers, and the like.
That's right, and I think this is going to be now a central discussion. People are now going to know 1325. There is.
Hello? Hello? I can't hear anything.
Tonight, and not just on this issue, but a number of issues. How did you take his reaction?
I was surprised that he didn't come with more policy proposals, given that on the trail he's been getting a lot of criticism for that. And tonight he had to actually answer that call. So I was actually a little surprised that he wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, and it was interesting to watch two Texans tangle over this issue. They do bring a lot of authority in that way. They speak personally about this issue in their hometowns. But I think probably in that moment that we just showed, it looked like Castro kind of got the better of the former congressman. But there are a number of sitting members of Congress, sitting senators on that stage who really are going to have to show over the next few weeks and months that they can govern on this issue. It's not going to be enough just to show that you have ideas and plans for the future. But I imagine a lot of Democratic voters are going to want to see that something is happening to improve the lives of people crossing the border now.
And Leon, to bring you back into this, I was struck by the number of candidates who didn't answer directly when the moderators pressed them to know what would you do on day one when it comes to those children in detention facilities. It took about 5 candidates until Jay Inslee answered, well, I would release them immediately. Talk to us about some of the dynamics around that and what should be done on day one by whoever takes over in the White House if it's a Democrat.
Yeah, correct. This is a major struggle for Democrats until they finally realize that what you need to do on day one is to restore the refugee programs that the president has canceled that will allow people to apply for this status from abroad and not have to come to the border in order to do it. If you say you're just going to release everybody that comes into the country, you risk really difficultly, especially with kids, that kids will be placed in the hands of people who do not have those best interests of the kids in mind. People who are smuggling the kids for labor, or sex trafficking, other purposes. And so you can't do that. That was a consensus reached by the entirety, 100 senators, 435 House members in 2008, that you had to have the kids in a location until you can find a suitable parent or guardian to come pick up the kids. And so we're not going to just change that all of a sudden. But what we have to do is to make it so that people have legitimate pathways to come into the United States, so that if you're coming illegally, the only reason you'd be doing that is because you're trying to break the law. Because if you were a refugee, you could automatically access the refugee program somewhere. Or if you did want to come on a worker visa, there would be worker visas available for people to be able to apply for. And so that's where the Democrats have to get into this. They can't get into the race of open border because that's where Trump will allow people to exploit that weakness. Instead, they have to talk about legal immigration and expanding it because that's the wheelhouse of where America is right now.
Leon Fresco, important points. Thank you so much. And it was fascinating, guys, to see tonight just the contrast, because over the past few months, as the Democrats as a united front have battled Donald Trump and immigration, tonight, all of a sudden, on just the turn of a dime, it seemed there were these fractures on this issue.
Well, I think the going into this and that picture really did set the stage for today. And when Jose Diaz-Balart, when he brought that up in the way that he did, so personal, so real, it turned the conversation at that moment in a way that it's made it central.
I agree. And it reminded the immigration was just one issue where Democrats were trying to make a point that it's not enough for them just to disagree with this president, but to present an alternative. They've spent a lot of time talking about how they don't agree with the wall or they don't agree with separating kids from parents. But this was taking it a step further. And we saw that on health care and wages as well. It wasn't enough in this conversation to say you disagree with the president. Democratic voters want to know, what else are you going to do?
You bring up that picture. It was so powerful. It really shaped the discussion this week. Our Ben Siegel in our Washington bureau was fact-checking some of the claims made about that picture today. He joins us now live. Hey, Ben, so tell us what the claims were and what you found out.
That's right, Devin. We're going to take a closer look. This immigration, a big part of this debate, that exchange with Congressman O'Rourke and former Secretary Castro.
Do you want me to go by
he specifically, Mr. Castro, mentioned that picture that, of course, gripped people across the country and the world of the family, the father and the daughter at the border, unsuccessfully crossing, having drowned in the river, the Rio Grande River. Let's take a closer look at what Mr. Castro said about what caused that episode that was captured in that photo.
I'm very proud that in April I became the first candidate to put forward a comprehensive immigration plan. And we saw those images. Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off. If I were president today, and it should spur us to action, if I were president today, I would sign an executive order that would get rid of Trump's zero tolerance policy, the Remain in Mexico policy, and the metering policy. This metering policy is basically what prompted Oscar and Valeria to make that risky swim across the river.
Okay, so the question here, listening to Mr. Castro, is did the Trump administration's policies have some role to play here in leading to the death of Mr. Ramirez and his daughter? That was seen in that photo. He mentioned the metering policy. That's the limiting of the number of requests for asylum that the Trump administration is taking at the border. That, in turn, is causing longer waits on the Mexican side of the border. And we know from the Associated Press and some other local media reports that Mr. Martinez and his daughter were trying to unsuccessfully request asylum, and because they were not able to do so, in part because of these long delays and frustrations because of this policy, they decided to try to cross the river themselves. Of course, that was unsuccessful, and we see the heartbreaking evidence of that. But a little more context there behind his Secretary Castro's reference to that photo.
Ben Siegel, thanks so much. The context is important. We know that you are on the fact-check beat. There are several more fact-checks in the pipeline, so we'll bring those to you very shortly. Let's take a live look at what's actually going on here right now in the spin room in Miami. There is a lot of activity. You see folks with those signs. Those are representatives from each of the candidates' campaigns indicating who is representing those individuals. Sometimes it's a spokesperson for the campaign. Sometimes it's a surrogate. Sometimes the candidate themselves will come out. So far, I don't see any big names. Let's go check in with Avery Harper, who's out there, and see which candidates may be down there. There's Bill de Blasio.
Yeah, we're here with Mayor de Blasio. Hey.
How you doing?
So tell me about you. You interrupted quite a few times. You were very passionate. Why was it important for you to kind of jump in there and get your words in edgewise?
When I didn't agree with what I heard, I had to say something. Maybe that's the New Yorker in me, but I tell you something. I mean, when I heard Beto O'Rourke talking about private insurance, I had to point out how many people in this country with private insurance can't get the health care they need. Tens of millions of people. Why was health care the #1 issue of the 2018 election? Because there's a huge number of Americans who aren't getting the health care they need, and they know it. They know the system's broken. And the same on the question of war. We were 10 minutes away from a major war. And Democrats and Republicans both have not stood up and taken responsibility. The Congress should always insist on the right to decide on such things. A lot of times the Congress has looked the other way because it was convenient. We got to have this blunt conversation in America. So that's why I jumped in, because I think we got to talk about some things that are not being talked about. I think that's what the voters want to hear. We also have to talk about this party. This party didn't stand for something clear in 2016. That's why we lost. Donald Trump didn't win as much as we lost in a lot of ways. We have a chance in this primary election to actually get it right. And I'm going to call out people and say, we better be a progressive party. We better be the party of working people, or we're going to lose again.
Mayor, you talked about your son tonight.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation that you have had with New Yorkers before, but not for several years.
Yes.
Was it a difficult decision to decide to talk about him, to talk about your concerns of his interactions with the police? And are you concerned about blowback from the NYPD?
Look, I've been down this road before. And it's the truth, Grace. I said it because it's the truth. The people of the United States of America need to know who I really am, and they need to know who all the candidates are. You know, Charlene and I had these conversations with Dante to protect him, and millions of American parents have had the same conversation. And somehow, it's not supposed to be part of our American dialogue, but it's the truth. So I wanted people to hear it's the truth, and we need to deal with these things. But I also wanted to hear a message of hope. In New York, we've made real changes. You know, neighborhood policing is working. De-escalation, training de-escalation is working. But it's a conversation we have to have.
Mr. Mayor, has anything changed in New York City to make that?
That was our Avery Harper reporting. That was our Avery Harper reporting there with Bill de Blasio, getting instant reaction. He was one of the most boisterous on that stage tonight, interjecting right out of the gate, also talking about his son, an African-American, Dante, and drawing that back to his policy on policing and guns. Speaking of policy on guns and policing, let's go now to our Beatrice Peterson, who is over with a group that is very concerned about gun violence in this country. She's over with She the People, a watch party. Beatrice, tell us their reaction to this conversation on guns and the other issues that are important to them tonight.
Thank you so much, Devin. I am here with Amy Allison and Andrea Mercado from She the People and the New Florida Majority. And we just had an amazing watch party, several hundred viewers, a lot of people in the room listening to the candidates, learning more about the candidates. I'm here. Amy, can you tell me a little bit about the event itself?
Well, we organized it right here in Florida because, you know, nobody on stage today or tomorrow is going to win the candidacy without women of color who are one of 4 voters in states like Florida, and no one is going to win the White House without Florida. And so this was an important to understand the role, the critical role of women of color, not only as voters, but as shaping the issues. And we heard a lot of the issues that are really critical to women of color being surfaced tonight, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, and right before the debate, you took the stage in a forum. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the things that people were talking about, some of the things they wanted to hear about, some of the issues?
It was an amazing conversation with leaders in Florida, including Andrea, who really had economic issues, healthcare expansion, wanting to address the humanitarian moral crisis of the treatment of refugees on the border, and also have a solution for the climate crisis that affects us all, but people especially here in Florida. We surfaced those issues. We had women that represented the whole diversity of women of color present those issues to the crowd, and then we watched the debates. And this is the moment where we toss the polls out that told us who was electable, and we decide who's speaking for us and with us, who's with us. And that is what's going to determine who has the momentum to make it through this primary.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about the event from your perspective? It was a very diverse group. There were a lot of people, I'm sure, that came up to you after you spoke on stage earlier, who told you some of the issues they were looking for. I mean, what were some of the things you were hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, it's important to recognize that women of color have been a force for change in this country for generations. But oftentimes our voices and our leadership aren't really elevated to the national stage. And I think this was an important event to celebrate the voices and the leadership of women of color in politics, and to demand that candidates really answer and come up with solutions to the issues that our families are facing. We're really bearing the brunt of the attacks of this administration, and we're looking at candidates that are going to have bold solutions on health care, on climate change, on access to education, and to quality jobs. And I think this was a really important event to bring women of color together in Florida. You know, Miami's the most unequal city in the nation. Yeah. And, you know, I think we deserve a bold candidate who will be able to really answer and respond to that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you very much, ladies. Devin, there was a lot of different issues that people had on the plate. So I just want to toss it back to you. A lot of voters are listening and watching and are excited to hear what yet tomorrow has in store. Talk to you soon.
All right, our thanks to Beatrice Peterson, one of our young campaign reporters, over with She the People tonight at their watch party here across town. You're seeing on the right side of your screen their live picture from the Spin Room here in Miami. The spinsters are out, the campaigns, their representatives, some of the candidates. Tom Perez, the head of the Democratic Party, is here in the room as well. A lot of activity here now trying to spin the messages, build momentum coming out of this night one of a debate doubleheader here in Miami. We're going to take a quick commercial break right now. I'm Devin Dwyer in Miami. We'll be right back. You're watching ABC News Live.
ABC News, straightforward. Okay, let's be straightforward about these facts. More Americans wake up to GMA than any other morning show, period. That's 6 years in a row running, with GMA as America's most watched morning show. And for 2 straight years, GMA has been honored winner of the Emmy for Outstanding Morning Show.
Thank you at home.
Robin, George, Michael, GMA. We get it. In times like these, to be the trusted place more Americans come to start their day, well, let's just say it's an honor and an adrenaline rush. And we know we can't do it without you.
We just want to say how thankful we are.
So thank you for helping make GMA America's most watched news show.
Come on now.
We are GMA.
Finally, one last thing. Where would we be without listening?
Damn!
Please include that.
ABC News, straightforward.
As we fly over ground zero.
Almost every home here has sustained damage. Everything has just been wiped out.
Glad you're okay.
Oh, thank you.
You could hear the gunfire just around this wall. So this is one of those checks. Around the corner here are the children. What's your name? Back on the job.
Back in the job.
Help build my country back. How are you? How you doing? Good to see you.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
And welcome back to Miami. I'm Devin Dwyer with ABC News Live. Special coverage of the first Democratic primary debate of the season. We're here in the spin room. You saw Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar here. She's giggling with reporters just behind me. Our Avery Harper has been working the floor in the room. She just caught up with John Delaney, the former Maryland congressman. He got in a few swipes tonight. Let's listen into what the former congressman has to say right now.
And do you worry that that you might not be perceived well because of the way that you jumped in repeatedly?
No, I think people probably perceive me as having something to say.
What do you hope Americans came away with from your performance tonight?
That I'm a problem solver and I tell the truth.
Do you think that you hope that more people will know who you are at this point?
Yes, there's no question about that. And that's what's great about these debates.
How are you going to make your way into the debates come fall? The requirements get higher.
Well, we have to make sure we meet them, and we're working hard on it. So, that's the goal for this summer.
You had some different ideas on health care.
Totally different.
Tell us about that a little bit.
So I think everyone should have health care as a basic human right. And I have a plan called Better Care, because every single American, health care for free. But what I don't
All right, Congressman John Delaney there with our Avery Harper on the floor here of the spin room. Let's take another overhead live look. A lot of activity going on right now here as these candidates look to spin the debate tonight. A lot of buzz for Bill de Blasio, the New York mayor, also for Julian Castro, former secretary in the Obama administration. Look at that horde of cameras and people moving. Our Rachel Scott is here. She covers the Trump campaign because, Rachel, President Trump is on his way to Japan and has been tweeting about this for the past couple of hours. Give us a sense of what the Trump campaign is thinking of what they saw tonight.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were trying to guess what the president's response would be. And of course, he tweeted initially and said that it was boring, just flat out. Just said boring, all caps. That was his initial response. Obviously, we think that that's directed towards the debates tonight. But his team is out with a new statement. His press secretary came out and is talking about immigration, right? I mean, this was something that we saw, a big issue on that debate stage, and they said that they think the Democrats are actually trying to exploit the situation at the border, that horrible tragic photo of that father and his daughter laying lifeless face down. And so they're saying, listen, tonight was their main messages. Tonight was kind of the best case for the president's campaign. They think that, you know, the Democratic Party is too progressive, is moving towards socialism, and that's the message that they're trying to paint tonight.
And it certainly was one of the criticisms that we heard, the S word. We didn't hear it talked a lot about on the debate stage tonight, but there were pretty clear contrasts and visions. Let's go back to our Avery Harper. She's down on the floor, I believe just caught up with Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. Let's see where she is right now. What do you got, Avery?
We just walked across the spin room with Senator Amy Klobuchar. She's heading to another interview right now, but we do see kind of the chaos that is going on here on the spin room floor. Everyone is trying to get those questions in with those candidates right now. We can turn around, we can even watch Senator Amy Klobuchar set up for her interview here. We know that there's a lot of candidates who are making their way slowly to the spin room floor, kind of being mobbed by all of the journalists who are here in the room. Again, lots and lots of journalists who are all over this room right now, trying to get a sense for how those candidates are feeling after that debate. So we're going to continue to walk this way. Come on, let's walk this way and see who else we can find on the floor right now. We do know that Senator Cory Booker is on stage right now. Oh, here goes Julian Castro.
We'll be right back after, I promise.
There you go. All right.
Up.
Castro's right here, but he's going on national.
Thank you for hanging in there.
How do you feel like you performed tonight?
I feel like I did great. You know, the media have been paying attention to only a couple of candidates in this race. What people saw tonight was that I'm a very strong candidate. I believe I surprised a lot of people. They didn't expect it, but I showed that I have the right experience to be president. I have a strong vision for the future of this country. I can stand up when I'm challenged, and that I can beat Donald Trump.
Some people said they're surprised by you. Some folks are looking and they're noticing you for the first time. What do you say to that?
I'd say stay tuned in. You know, stay tuned, because I have a strong vision for the future of this country. I know that I can go and get the electoral votes in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania that we barely lost by 75,000 votes. And I'm the best hope that the party has to get the 29 electoral votes of this state of Florida, the 11 electoral votes of Arizona, and the 38 electoral votes of my home state of Texas.
Were you people from Central America be scared under your administration to come to the U.S.?
Not at all. In fact, the first thing that I would do if I'm president is to end horrendous policies like metering and remain in Mexico and the zero tolerance policy of this administration. And I would immediately engage countries like Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, these Northern Triangle countries, so that we can partner with them so people can find safety and opportunity at home instead of having to come to the United States. Last month, there were 144,000 people that came to our southern border. This president has been a total failure on the issue of immigration because he knew that we had an issue with people, a lot of people coming to the United States from Central America. Instead of working proactively with those countries to help improve the quality of life and the safety in those countries so people could stay there at home and be safe and find jobs, he's talked about a wall. He's been cruel toward little children and their parents. He's wasted time. And I would make sure that we actually address this issue. Es importante reformar el sistema de inmigración y tratar.
All right, that was our Avery Harper. With former Secretary Julian Castro there. One of the big names of the night. He's had a pretty big moment on immigration there. I'm joined here with our political director, Rick Klein. Our White House reporter, Rachel Scott, is here as well. Rick, I want to get your hot take here. Who was the big winner tonight in all of this?
Joe Biden.
Somebody not on the stage.
Yeah, I'll tell you, talking to his team beforehand, they were ready to get blasted, to just get socked in the jaw time and again. They were telling us, you know, all the preparatory work around that, and he was going to have a say tomorrow night, and he was going to be bigger than all that. His name didn't even come up, guys. Nobody talked about Joe Biden. This is a guy that's got 35% of the vote in polls, and nobody went there. So obviously this is an introductory phase. I talked to one of his campaign staffers, Biden's campaign staffers, and said, smart of them to do this. They need to make themselves known before they start socking it to the former vice president. But given the pre-game hype around this and given the missteps that Biden has had recently, I was just surprised that no one talked about him.
There was a lot of pre-buzz about that, a lot of buzz about Elizabeth Warren as well. She sort of held steady tonight. She was front and center. She got the most airtime of all the candidates on that stage.
This was a night that was heavy on biography and heavy on wonkiness, and I think she let her wonk show, and she got to talk about what it is in her own background. It seemed passionate, it seemed from the heart, and that kind of fiery populism that she brings, it seems genuine when she delivers it. And I think she had the advantage of being in the center of the stage. She got a lot of questions directed to her first. You didn't hear a lot of contrasts around the way. There were some disagreements, particularly on healthcare, that I think were notable. But for the most part, she was able to set forward a policy.
Yeah, let's get into that on healthcare. She did throw a couple of punches on healthcare. Actually said that some of her colleagues on stage tonight lacked the courage, her word, to go big on that. Here's a little bit of that debate tonight, which spilled over early on in the debate.
Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Just a show of hands, start off with.
And I understand. There are a lot of politicians who say, oh, it's just not possible, we just can't do it, have a lot of political reasons for this. What they're really telling you is they just won't fight for it. Well, health care is a basic human right, and I will fight for basic human rights.
Just to be very clear, I'll give you 10 seconds. Would you replace private insurance?
No, I think the choice is fundamental to our ability to get everybody cared for.
Private insurance is not working for tens of millions of Americans. When you talk about the co-pays, the deductibles, the premiums, the out-of-pocket expenses, it's not working.
That's right. So for those for whom it is not working, they can choose Medicare. For the culinary workers in Nevada who I listened to, who negotiated for those plans, they're able to keep them.
I think we should be the party that keeps what's working and fixes what's broken. I mean, doesn't that make sense? I mean, we should give everyone in this country health care as a basic human right for free. Full stop. But we should also give them...
All right, a pretty hefty debate there. We're going to interrupt that replay to go to our Avery Harper on the phone now. She's with Cory Booker from New Jersey. Let's go to Avery.
I'm going to have a lot of opportunity to continue to make my case and make an impression. I think we made a positive impression tonight.
Was that boring, Senator Booker? Was it boring?
Guys, he's going to come
President
right back.
Trump said it was boring.
He's going to come right back. He's going to come right back.
Okay, well, that was insane. You see kind of the craziness that's going on here on the floor of the spin room. As some of these candidates try to make their way to certain media outlets for interviews. I kind of lost him at this point, but he is kind of being protected by a lot of his campaign folks. People here, you can see, it's so crazy. So we'll try and get back with Senator Booker, and we'll come back as soon as we have something. Back to you, Devin.
Yeah, good hustle, Avery. Thanks so much. You're going after those candidates as they come out of the gate. We appreciate that. But speaking of Cory Booker, Rick and Rachel, he was one of the sort of middle ground folks on health care tonight. We were talking about the contrast there, and as Elizabeth Warren said, she would go all in. We saw a raise of hands who would eliminate private health insurance. Cory Booker was a guy who sort of staked out a middle ground. Didn't seem to get a lot of energy, a lot of applause for that.
First of all, hand-raising moments, big in debates. I don't know if you guys remember, but they kind of come up in the past.
They do.
I think Elizabeth Warren's been raising money off of that moment. There's her hand proudly up. Bill de Blasio's up as well, maybe a little more attentive.
He had a moment of his own a little bit later on a different subject, though.
He did. I think de Blasio.
What was the Iran nuclear deal?
I think de Blasio had got to be happy about that from the guys in the wings. But to your point about Booker, it's not easy to defend the status quo in the Democratic Party these days, but coming back to Obamacare, building on the promise of Obamacare, we're going to hear more of that tomorrow, because that happens to be a key difference between Biden and Bernie Sanders as well. But this is a big one, and I actually think it's a defining one for Democrats when they talk about the tone, when they talk about the substance. Where do you stand on this? This is a basic one, because everyone on that stage wants universal health insurance. They want to expand at least on Obamacare, but go that next step and make it universal single payer, make it Medicare for all. That's a bold idea. When Bernie Sanders talked about it a few years ago, it was very much the minority view in the Democratic Party. that seems to have shifted. And do you want to be the candidate defending the status quo?
There's a lot of energy behind it. Also, we just got to get in a note from the Trump perspective on all this. I've talked to a couple Trump folks. They're salivating practically at the energy behind Medicare for All. They love this. They think people are scared of it. They think they can run on it.
Yeah, and that's been the messaging all along. This was an issue that they were looking at early on. They were concentrating on this before the candidates even took the stage. And this is something that they want to continue hitting the Democratic candidates on. This idea of Medicare for all, this idea that it's too progressive. And they hope, again, that lures moderate voters towards their side at the end of the day.
Let's talk to some voters who have a stake in this healthcare debate. We had them on the show here on ABC News Live a week or so ago dealing with drug prices. These are two women from two different states that have had to make special caravan trips to Canada to buy prescription drugs because the insulin cost is so expensive here in the United States. I'm joined now from Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, from where's my sheet here? I forgot our guests. Michigan and Minnesota, my home state. Okay. Live TD. Lila Greenseed, I'm sorry, Lila, you're from Minnesota. Of course, Julian Rippolone from Michigan. Great to see you both. Thanks for staying up late with us. Give us your instant reaction. I'll start with you, Lila, on what you thought of the healthcare side of this debate tonight.
Well, I'm a mother of a child with type 1 diabetes and a small business owner. And so I'm watching the debate, and I'm hoping to hear from candidates two things. First, I want to hear whether they have a plan that's going to give me some immediate relief right now from the high prescription drug costs that our family is incurring. And then I want to hear what is their vision for the future? Where are we heading? And how will that benefit me and my daughter in particular? My daughter's 13 years old. She'll be graduating from high school when this next president is finishing out his or her term. And I want to know that she's going to be in the position of having a much easier time with affording and accessing the medications she needs to stay alive. I'll say the debate tonight was hard to try to sort through and listen. There's a lot of platitudes. There's a lot of policy talk, not a lot of specifics that really spoke to me that helped me to understand which of these candidates is going to be the best for me and my family.
So safe to say you're still very much undecided coming out of this night one of a two-night debate. We still have the other half, of course, tomorrow. Jillian, you have had to make trips up to Canada to get drugs as well from Michigan. Did you hear anything tonight on drug prices that caught your eye, caught your ear?
With Devin, as you know, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and my brother's also a type 1 diabetic. So for us, what we want to hear, a person living with a chronic illness, is what are these candidates going to do for us, right? Our main concern right now, living with a chronic illness, is right now for us personally, it's insulin affordability and drug prices. So where our votes are going to lie with the people who are really pushing for change with insulin affordability. This is a vial of insulin, and some of us need 3 a month to stay alive. Right now, this one vial of insulin costs $340 retail. That's with no insurance. Or even people with insurance, the problem is people have high deductibles and high copays. So that's making people use different avenues to get the insulin and supplies that they need. People are using the diabetes black market just to get insulin to stay alive, and people are road tripping to Canada and to Mexico just to get affordable insulin. One vial of insulin in Canada and Mexico is around $30. So how come right now in the United States in 2019 that we're paying up to $340 for one vial of insulin?
It's just insane that it's that much, and that it's forcing both of you to drive out of the country to get your drugs. I want to go back to Lila because she is from Minnesota. We heard Amy Klobuchar tonight address the medical costs issue. She said there's a lot of foam, but not a lot of beer in that glass. It was a line that got a lot of applause. What do you think of your home state senator tonight?
Well, what really appealed to me was when she said that pharma doesn't own her. That's really important to me. I want to know that whoever is in the White House is going to be looking out for my interests and not for the interests of big pharma. So those messages I heard from her and from others, and I feel that some confidence then that they'll be fighting for what people like me are really needing, which is relief from the high cost of prescription drugs and healthcare overall.
And we know that from recent polls, it's a top issue for all Democratic voters. Health care, number one, every time. And it's certainly got a good part of the debate tonight. Lila Greenside from Minnesota, Jillian Rippolone from Michigan. Thank you both very much for staying up late, for watching the debate, and for Skyping in. It's great to see you, and hope you come back with us again soon. Thank you. Let's go live back now down to the spin room floor here, where our Avery Harper is working the crowd, and she has caught up with Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. Let's take a listen in
Washington gets influenced, gets shaped, gets just slightly revised to help the rich get richer and to leave everybody else behind. We got to change that.
Senator Warren, how do you keep this momentum going today? How do you keep this momentum going?
Talk about tonight?
I'm sorry?
You talked about the plans you didn't get to talk about
Yeah.
tonight. Well, what's your next plan? What do you have next on the agenda of all of the plans you want
The
to make?
reason it's next is because I haven't yet talked about it, so we got one coming. But I will say, I just yesterday released a plan to talk about democracy. You know, one of the most important things we do in a democracy is vote, and we treat it like one of the least important. Voting is inconvenient, the lines are long, the ballots can be confusing, the machines are old, and it's insecure, as the Russians have shown us. 8,000 systems scattered around the country. Some of them are still running on Windows 2000. I have a plan that says we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to make voting easy, we're going to make it state-of-the-art, and we're going to make those votes as secure as Fort Knox. That's one of the foundational pieces of democracy. And our responsibility to ourselves and to future generations is making the investment in democracy so that it is truly the will of the people.
Senator,
how
do you keep this momentum going from tonight on the campaign trail? What is next for you?
You know, it's going to be more town halls, more unfiltered questions from folks all around, and also going to more places. I've now been to 21 states and Puerto Rico. We've done more than 100 town halls. I've taken more than 2,000 questions. And, boy, we must be crowding in soon on about 35,000 selfies. You know, that, though, is about a chance every time to hear from someone who's engaged, who's there, who wants to know if government really can work for them. Last night, right here in Miami, I'm doing a long photo line after I've done a town hall, and a woman in her 40s reaches over, gives me a hug, and then whispered in my ear, type 1 diabetes. I've had 2 organ transplants recently. Nobody who does private health insurance wants me. Please fight for Medicare for all.
Senator
Those are the fights, and that's what we have to stay
Senator
in.
Warren,
Senator, you had a plan for Senator
unequivocal about the role of private insurance in Medicare for all tonight. You talked about it in a way I hadn't heard you talk about it before.
So, look, I'm with Bernie on Medicare for all, and the reason for it is the work I have done.
All right, so that was our Avery Harper there with Senator Elizabeth Warren in a very busy, packed spin room here in Miami. The campaigns are revving up their messaging operations after tonight's first presidential debate of the 2020 campaign. Rick Klein is here with me, Rachel Scott as well. We're inside the room. No sign of slowing down, Rick. This thing is in full swing tonight, and you were just saying that it's very surprising that Elizabeth Warren, who came into tonight, center stage, the only candidate on the stage with double digits, would come out here after the fact. Normally, the frontrunner, by tradition, would never sink to the level of needing to come out and spin a performance.
Unless they screw it up. That's the unwritten rule, and I never really understood it, but the unwritten rule has always been, if you're the frontrunner, you don't need to spin, and you send other people, campaign managers and the like. This is one of those political traditions that Donald Trump blew up. Because he said, look, all these reporters were around, all these cameras, of course I'm going to go in there. He worked the room, and it was actually dangerous to walk in a spin room with Donald Trump because of the stampede of cameras. So to me, it's heartening to see that lesson flipped, because Elizabeth Warren, who had a very strong night by all accounts, the highest polling person out there, is taking that same advice and saying, look, I have nothing to hide about my message. I want to go talk about it. I'm not letting the other people just take all the options.
She's front and center, and while not a stampede, I would say it's looking like a mosh pit of sorts out there. Maybe we should crowd surf a little bit. But first, we're going to go to a commercial break. We will be right back here on ABC News Live with some more special coverage from the first Democratic primary debate.
ABC News, straightforward.
This Sunday, streaming on ABC News Live. Celebrate love.
Celebrate life.
Celebrate history.
Celebrate pride.
Extraordinary access. Incredible stories.
Celebrate.
Celebrate. Celebrate Pride. Streaming on ABC News Live this Sunday starting at 11 a.m. Eastern.
We can live free.
In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
Do you trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Whew. Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
Doctors. Batatas. Ismail? Yes. David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view.
These guys appreciate it.
And we're back here in Miami in the spin room after the first Democratic primary debate. I'm Devin Dwyer. I'm here with former Congressman John Delaney. Congressman, great to see you. You were there on the edge of the stage fighting your way in with elbows tonight. How'd you feel about your performance?
You know, you got to do that once in a while. I felt good. I told the truth on a lot of important issues that someone had to tell the truth.
You did
like
tell
Medicare for all.
You did what you say is telling the truth on this issue of taking things from people that they really like. There was a clear contrast tonight on the #1 issue in this campaign, and that is health care.
Right.
You're not an advocate for Medicare for all.
But I'm an advocate for everyone having health care as a basic right, and I think every American should get a basic government plan for free. But I just don't think as part of doing that, we should go around and tell 150 million Americans that their health care, many of them like it, by the way, is going to be illegal. You know, our seniors, there's something called Medicare Advantage, and seniors can choose it, right? They can choose Medicare Advantage over Medicare. It's private insurance. 50% of our seniors are choosing it. And they're choosing it in record numbers. Like in Washington State, Jay Inslee State, about 70% of the recent crop of, quote, seniors chose Medicare Advantage. How's this election going to go if we tell our seniors, of which half of them have this private insurance version of Medicare, that that's now illegal? I mean, that's a crazy idea.
It's something that you and Governor Hickenlooper and other sort of moderates in the crowd have been harping on, putting forth, and that's spilled out into the open today. Who do you think won the debate tonight?
Oh, I don't know. I think we did great. So,
and
the American people always win these debates.
Were you surprised that Joe Biden, the polling frontrunner in this race, was not mentioned once?
No, I think it was, listen, it was hard to make the point you wanted to make, let alone talk about people who aren't on the stage.
And what did you make of Elizabeth Warren's performance in front and center tonight?
Senator Warren has real.
She had a lot more time than you.
Yeah, she did. I wish I would have had her time.
So what's next for you, Congressman?
I'm going to Iowa.
You're going to Iowa, and you are the first Congressman, we should remind everybody, to be in Iowa. You've hit all those 99 counties. We will see you out there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for stopping by. Great to see you. Thank you, Congressman. That was Congressman John Delaney, a former Congressman of Maryland, who was on stage tonight. Had a big night there on the edge of the stage. I'm also joined now by Adam Green.
Good to see you.
Adam, great to see you, the head of the Progressive Campaign Committee. And Adam, give us your big takeaway from this. Who was the winner tonight for progressives in all of this?
Well, we are the first national group to support Elizabeth Warren. I think she did great. One thing to keep in mind is that for millions of Americans, this really was the opening argument. Most people haven't tuned in a lot. And I thought she's been doing something that was very persuasive that she did tonight, which is make the case for big structural change, make the case against big insurance companies, make the case for Medicare for all, and do it in a really compelling way that clearly positions her as the person on the side of everyday families willing to challenge very powerful interests.
We saw Republicans today, both outside this venue, the president from Air Force One, and from some of Warren's competitors on stage, John Delaney, one of them, raised some alarms about sweeping change so immediately. Socialism is a word that keeps being dropped. Are you concerned at all about how Republicans will use that against whoever is the Democratic nominee if it ends up being someone like Elizabeth Warren?
No, I was struck last week when Joe Biden said that if he's president, there will be, quote, there will be no fundamental change, is what he said, which is weird as somebody who ran with Obama on a message of change, right? The American people always want change. They want change and improvement in their own lives. And a mom working 3 jobs needs to wake up on election day thinking there's a reason for me to vote today. It's not tinkering around the edges. It's certainly not nothing will fundamentally change. It is my kid can actually go to college without being saddled with $100,000 in debt. I can go to a doctor without being saddled with $100,000 in debt. And that's the kind of big structural change Elizabeth Warren was talking about tonight.
What are you watching for tomorrow night in night 2 of this debate night?
Well, I'm curious actually how many of Elizabeth Warren's ideas from tonight loom over the debate stage tomorrow. I mean, look, she made a case tonight for Medicare for all that was grounded fundamentally in the uber popular proposition that we need to challenge big insurance companies that deny people care.
Is Bernie Sanders her biggest competition right now?
I actually don't think so. I think the 2 honeypots for Elizabeth Warren when it comes to getting new votes are Joe Biden voters and undecided voters, because both of them are fundamentally electability voters, people who want to beat Trump. And every time that Elizabeth Warren crushes on the campaign trail, every time she's the only person in a candidate forum to get a standing ovation, which she almost always is, people are like, oh, maybe she's our best foot forward against Trump. And a lot of those people are going. And I should say that we just launched something called switchtowarren.com, where we're chronicling the poll numbers. We're putting faces and stories on the poll numbers showing people switching for Biden and undecided.
She certainly is gaining in the polls. She's certainly having a moment tonight. Adam Green with the Progressive Change Committee, supporter of Elizabeth Warren. Thanks so much for stopping by. Great to have you here on ABC News Live. We're taking a live look there on the right-hand side of your screen here in the spin room in Miami. The action is still in full swing. We have candidates on the floor. We see Elizabeth Warren there on set doing an interview. Cory Booker is now working the room. Let's listen in on a little bit of what he has to say.
A lot of moments that showed America who I am, and this is one of those debates that I think that definitely advanced us towards the White House.
Senator, what do you have that Donald Trump should fear?
First of all, it's not about Donald Trump. We need to get rid of him. I'm uniquely qualified to get rid of Donald Trump. His turf, using his tactics and his demeaning.
And it looks like we just lost a picture there of Cory Booker in this sea of scrums here in the debate hall here in Miami. It's been great having you with us here on ABC News Live for some headlines and analysis of tonight's first Democratic debate. There are still 10 more candidates to take the stage in this first round, believe it or not. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern time, 2-hour debate, another round of questions. The big names, of course, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders. There's our graphic. Kamala Harris, who's been coming up, will be on stage. Mayor Pete Buttigieg is having a moment. Businessman Andrew Yang. A whole host of candidates and issues to come back tomorrow night here in Miami. We'll have preview coverage starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time here on ABC News Live. I'll be back tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time for an extended edition of ABC News Live in the briefing room. Here's a look back at tonight's debate. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Devin Dwyer in Miami. See you tomorrow.
That's what we call at home, all foam and no beer.
Who feel you're falling behind, who feel the American dream's not working for you. The immigrants didn't do that to you. The big corporations did that to you.
I will get that done as President of the United States, because this is not about policy, this is personal.
ABC News, straightforward.
This Sunday, streaming on ABC News Live. Celebrate love.
Celebrate life.
Celebrate history.
Celebrate Pride.
We can live free.
Extraordinary access, incredible stories.
Celebrate.
Celebrate.
Celebrate Pride, streaming on ABC News Live this Sunday starting at 11 a.m. Eastern.
We can live free.
In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
Do you trust him?
I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Whew.
Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying.
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
Doctors. Batatas. Ismail? Yes. David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view.
These guys appreciate it.
Immigration, Iran, and the economy. Just three of the issues tonight in the first Democratic presidential debate of the